Hi there, everybody. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this sketchbook and give you a flip through. If you've been following me for any time at all, you've probably heard me say that I just don't get collage. And I finally realized that it was something that I needed to figure out. What is my problem with collage? So I started this book, and I've got another one going, but this one I finished. And I wanted to give you a flip through and just tell you about what I'm gaining from this inquiry into collage. Now, this was an old sketchbook, and I don't know about you, but I start sketchbooks and then the idea kind of fades. So there's been pages that have been ripped out because they didn't really work out and they've been recycled and whatever it might be. But I wanted to explore collage, and I wanted to limit myself, so I limited this to brown and red, and I think there might be some yellow in here too. And I'm using a whole bunch of stuff that's just been laying around the studio that I didn't know what to do with. So just playing around with textures and different papers and different ways. These are all pages that I have made myself, or like old book pages. This was I don't know where that came from, off of a page of something. And I'm finding that as I play around with this, not only am I cleaning up my studio, I'm reimagining these bits of artwork that I had that at one time I loved. I just adored this page. It was in a book this size, and I just adored it. It was a double spread. But I've recycled it, so now I can still remember it, even though it's not something that I want to hold on to, or it was only one page in the whole sketchbook that worked, or something like that. So I just keep recycling these things. I'm also interested in using a bit of text cut oddly, and this is a gift from Catherine Rains in her free class. This is one of the things that she talks about, and it's a wonderful addition to get a graphic typography into your pieces, and that's something that's interested me for a long time. So I started playing around with how red can work with brown. Here's more of that page that I adore. Just playing with vertical angles, different values, different surface treatments, curved lines versus straight lines. I seem to have a tendency to go with straight lines in these things, so I started trying to push curves a little bit. Again, playing around with colors within this limited palette, adding the graphic bits of white and black. Those are left over from other studies that I did. Other pages, what is it like to add line, to go across the forms, to integrate them. And a little graphic black as a focal point. Adding lines with paint. Just continued exploration. This is actually a scrap page from a class that I taught. Adding white back in to create visual interest. I find that if you've looked at my paintings, they're oftentimes very soft with transitions. I don't use a lot of hard lines, and so I wanted to explore what's it like to use hard lines. I think that that is a key to part of my discomfort with collage, about the hard lines. These white squares are added with tissue paper, and I learned that I do not like using, this is, it's a texture paste, and I don't like using that over tissue paper and as a collage element. I wish it would have been better for me with paint. I really like the abstract nature of this, how it became abstract when it was taken out of context. I think that's what interested me with that. Looking at the possibility of mark making, I find this background to be very unpleasant to me. I'm not crazy about that color, but I think I was able to turn it into a fairly interesting composition anyway. So a lot of this is around just problem solving. You start something and then you have to solve the problem, or maybe not. Now, looking at this one, I'm just not a fan, but that's okay. I learned something from it. And there are bits of it that I like too. I really like the graphic lines. I think the yellow and these colors. Yeah, the colors just aren't doing it for me. This one's more interesting. I'm enjoying this yellow, particularly with the black and the scrap paper from, roll off on brayers and things like that. Now this one, there were 2 pages that were torn out in the middle here, and I had to leave a little bit of a tab so that the pages, the other half of the page would stay in. So I added tracing paper and I added elements to this. So I've got a collage with white added to it, and then if you flip under, there's other colored elements to it. And then this is the original collage. So playing with layers, that is something that really interests me. I do a lot of layering with paint, and to be able to layer with collage too is super interesting, I think. Here's more brown and red, also interesting. Playing with overlapping, not overlapping. Very big fan of this one. This was something that I drew and I cut it out closer to the edges, which is not something I usually do, and over the top of the black. I think that's super interesting. Enjoy that one too, a little bit more calm, more of that page that I love so much. I like that this is, you know, an old text anyway. I found a book on typography at the local Goodwill, and cutting those lines almost in half so that they're not readable, hardly recognizable, is very interesting to me. This is also Hebrew, so very interesting. I can't read it. I have no idea what it says, but I think visually it's a beautiful type. A bit of watercolor underneath some of this. That was interesting. I'm really intrigued too with this is Arches watercolor paper. I don't know if you can see it's off of a block, and they use a black glue to glue those pages together. And so the black stays on the edges unless you trim it. And it's an interesting, subtle graphic element, and it also echoes the black lines here. These papers were stained with coffee, with espresso. I find that to be rather interesting. And that's the end of my little book. So I hope that you found that interesting. If you have hesitated to consider collage as an art form or as a way to develop your imagery, your composition skills, your comfort with color, I encourage you to go ahead and take the dive, get a little book like this, and start using all the scrap that you have around your studio and see what you can do. I'll see you next week.